Hello everyone, welcome back to the Undercut. Welcome to the post-race podcast for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in 2024. So, straight off the bat, I'm going to put you on the spot. Your three talking points from the race, my friend.
From the race?
From the weekend, I guess. Your three talking points.
Where did Ferrari pace go?
Yep.
Should we keep Imola?
Yep.
And just the mid-pack. Drivers at risk.
I'm going to throw one in there.
Go on then.
Senna tribute.
Okay.
So, obviously, okay, let's start with Ferrari pace. So, I think we all overestimated Ferrari's pace.
Well, yeah, I think FP1 and FP2 gave us all hope.
Yeah.
Friday gave us mad hope.
And the week build-up before, everyone was talking about these upgrades, like they're going to be 3 or 4 tenths, quicker than they were in Miami. If they were, they would have dominated this race, but they weren't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's talk about then the mid-pack, shall we? Who are your drivers at risk?
Drivers at risk, drivers not at risk as well. Like, big shout to Yuki.
Yeah.
Again. Another stellar weekend.
Yep.
You can't fault the guy at the moment. You can't. No. He's on the way that he's performing. He's consistently outdoing Ricciardo. He's just performing week in, week out now. China was an outlier. I'll give him that. But if he carries on like this, on form, on ability, on pace, you have to look at maybe giving Yuki a shout at next season's Red Bull.
Yeah, there's no reason why he shouldn't. I don't see it at the moment anyway. And that last one, should Imola stay on the calendar?
See, without any interchangeable conditions,
yeah,
without any intervention, without any safety car like we had yesterday,
yeah,
without anything, just as a race on its own, it's so boring.
It is. And you know what? I actually thought about this. I was on the walk with the dog this morning, and I thought about this. What changes could you make to Imola to make it more interesting? And there's 3 changes I'd make. No, if overtaken, there's 3 changes I'd make, and I think it'd work. Turns 1 and 2, you need to make it a tighter chicane, so it's a heavier braking zone, so people could send it. Right? It's not. It's a little bit.
There is a problem going into turn 1 though, and that is the. It's the little kink. You go right and then left, and then you go into the chicane. And that's the issue, because drivers can easily just place the car in the middle and no one knows which way to go into turn 1. Now, if that was just a pure straight, I don't think we have that issue.
Okay, fair enough, but also I still think we do. I think turns 1 and 2 are too fast.
No, I think turns 1 and 2 are too fast, but I think drivers can be more decisive in the direction that they're going to overtake. Whereas if that bend's coming up and you're right up behind a car, that car's taking it inside and he's going straight to the middle of the track. Drivers then don't know. As we saw with George overtake on Perez, luckily for George, Perez and George's tyres were offset. But obviously, as you can see, George was very indecisive on whether to go inside, outside, because Perez was slap bang in the middle. And it's ridiculously easy to defend into turn 1 because obviously it's not as heavy braking zone, as you said, but it's also that sweeping left-hander makes it so easy for cars who are defending because they just place it in the middle and it's job done. Like, there's not enough room either side. People are indecisive because it's a left-hander. Like, we saw the crash between Bottas and George. That was the cause of it, because of that left-hander.
That's fair enough, yep. So that could be a change as well. I'd make the chicane tighter though, so there's a heavier braking zone. I'd keep the kink just before the hairpin. I keep that because I think it's quite challenging and people it runs
before the hairpin.
There's the chicane before the hairpin.
Villeneuve chicane.
I'd keep that. Yeah. Because it's challenging for the drivers.
Yeah, I quite like that because of that gravel trap on the side.
Yeah, it runs the risk of drivers running off into the gravel trap.
Yeah.
I'd then I wouldn't have the hairpin straight after. I'd extend the straight.
Yeah,
round a bit.
That's got to be
And then-
extended to give a bit more like slipstream, bit
And
more.
then I'd make a tighter hairpin.
Yeah.
So there's a bigger braking zone, a tighter hairpin, because no one can overtake in the hairpin at the moment unless you've got mad
like
fresh
the
tires.
Portugal hairpin.
Like the Portugal hairpin, right?
Yeah.
A tighter hairpin, tighter, right? And
Yeah.
then I'd keep the rest the same up until that chicane that we've got. You know the what the slowest point on the track?
The big curbs.
The big curbs. Now, here's the thing. I like that chicane.
I love it.
It's very good. But also, I'm going to get rid of it because then that makes it a full straight down to Ravazza, right? I'd then also get rid of Ravazza and I'd make another hairpin there and I'd put a DRS zone where that chicane was.
All the way down.
Into where Ravazza is, make it a hairpin.
Yeah.
So then there's 2 DRS zones back to back and there's a bit more battling going on. You could see it. So I don't want to get rid of Imola because it's such a historic track and there's so much, everything that happened with Senna there, and you don't want to get rid of that history, right? And it's a good track as well. It's a challenging track. Even Max Verstappen saying
it's a driver's track, but it's
a
not
driver's track. But if you make those changes, those small changes, I think you've got a track that drivers can overtake on. I think that's what I'd do anyway.
Yeah, I think changes are needed to the track to make it more entertaining.
Just modernize it.
Because I mean, if we look at it literally our top 3 was the 3 positions it started in.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed was Piastri got in front of Sainz through a pit stop. That wasn't even an overtake.
That should tell you everything.
Top 5.
Most of the big overtakes that happened as well were people on fresh tyres. Like you saw Perez just get swallowed up. You saw Magnussen and Zhou. Like it was all battles with people on very offset tyres. There wasn't many battles with people.
There wasn't a battle.
Even with Max losing out to Lando at the end, that was only coming about because Max's tyres clearly were just so much more further gone than Lando's. Lando was able to keep them. So,
it's something that needs changing because that race, obviously we've seen great Imola races with the rain that came down 2021.
Yep.
That was very interesting then. Great race. But without that little splash of weather, without that safety car, without anything like that, it's dead.
Yeah.
And Summit does need sorting because if we have like a series of the next 2-3 years like that we had, I'm not going to want it on the calendar anymore.
No, that's true. Yeah, you are right. But either way, let's get into our driver scores then. So basically, the way this works, if you haven't seen it before, is basically we rank every driver 1 to 5 based on their weekend performance. So that's mainly qualifying and race. But of course, if the practice session that they did on Friday or Saturday influences what they were able to do in the qualifying and the race, that also gets factored into the result.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into this, shall we? We start from last place in the race and we go all the way up into first place, which is obviously Max Verstappen. So let's start then, shall we? I'm just getting the results up. I'm trying to delay as much as possible because I did not become prepared with the results. Alex Albon. Obviously, DNF'd. The only classified DNF of the race.
Yeah.
For me,
the only classified.
The only classified one because Fernando retired with like a few laps to go. So yeah, he's classified. For me, it's a 2 from Alex Albon. In the qualifying session, obviously outperforming Sargent again, making it to Q2.
P14. He got through to Q2.
He got through to Q2, so there's props where props given, but he just had a stinky race. He had a really stinky race.
I think the downfall came from his team in that pit stop when they didn't put the tyre on correct.
Yeah, it did, but
and ever since then he wasn't able to recover.
No, and
it was a lap down by that point.
Yeah, and I can't give him a 3 because the race is, the race wasn't.
Yeah, it was nowhere.
It isn't a 1 because obviously the pit stop isn't his fault.
It wasn't
the pit stop isn't his fault, but I can't give him any higher than a 2. It's like he's DNF'd. It's last place.
Yeah, it's done
for Alex Albon.
Yeah.
Is it a 2 for yourself as well?
I agree.
You agree? Let's move on to Fernando Alonso.
Honestly, he's had an absolute stinker. of a whole weekend, and I think if you're gonna give him a 1, it's got to be.
A 1 is definitely justified for Fernando this weekend.
It's 100% justified. He caused his own downfall in qualifying.
Yep.
He was stinky in the practice. He had a crash.
He crashed in the practice.
He fucked up his own quali and went out in Q1. Granted, he started in the pit lane, but went absolutely nowhere. I don't think I ever saw him go above P16 in the whole race.
Now there is cause to say that I think qualifying, if you qualified down the order, it's nailed on that you're pretty much making no progress based on how that race went. But then again, that means that Fernando's mistake in qualifying has cost him more than it usually would in a normal race.
Yeah, it's his mistake.
Yeah, and for that, I've got to give him a 1 as well. I'm usually not the one to give 1s out unless someone absolutely bins it. But Fernando, on Fernando's standards, it's not good enough. It's really, really not good enough.
It's not good enough, especially when your teammate is Lance Stroll and he's whitewashed you this weekend.
Yeah.
Simple
We'll get on to Stroll as well. Valtteri Bottas finished 18th.
Again.
Finished 18th, qualified.
Q1
16th.
Exit. Didn't he out? Did he out-qualify?
He out-qualified Joe. Joe was 17th. Bottas
Joe out-raced him.
Yeah, Joe out-raced him.
The
thing is, though, we don't see the Saubers on TV, really, do we?
The Q1 Exit, they just look slow all weekend. I mean, I think I'm going to give it a 2 with the fact that they were so close in quali, but Joe outdone him.
It's a high 2, and Joe beat him where it mattered.
I think that's the thing. If Joe's beating him in the race, I think it's a 2.
Yeah, you can't really grade it any other way.
Yeah,
they're not anywhere near the points to really make some sort of conclusive.
No, yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like when we come to Joe, I think Joe's a 3 because he's beaten Bottas.
Yeah, that's just how it is. That's all it is. 17th, Logan Sargent.
He beat Albon.
He did, but he also, we have to remember,
he qualified.
He qualified. Yeah. Well, the thing is with Logan Sargent is that where you expect him?
Yes. But it's not good enough. It's as simple as that. And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. And it's not a 1 because he's not binned it.
No.
It's a 2.
Yeah, it's still a 2 for Logan Sargent.
Simply, his teammates qualifying 14th, he's qualifying 19th last, essentially, other than Fernando. So it's a 2. It's a 2. You can't have a 3 because he's nowhere near Albon during the qualifying. Simple as that.
And the only reason Albon gets 2 is because his race has been absolutely binned off. So yeah, Sargent's got to be. And the thing is, I think also, by the way, when you're in such a tight battle like Williams aren't a million miles away from getting points every weekend. You know, it's marginal because the teams are so close. When Albon's been close, he's been 11th a few races. When Albon isn't there, Sargent needs to be the backup to pick up the pieces. He needs to be there if something happens in front. He needs to be available to get points for Williams because the constructors' battle is so tight this year. Even though RB are sort of kind of pulling away from the rest of them, RB are still. They are, yeah, but a good couple of results, and Williams and any of the others are right there with them. So
yeah. Any of the teams are right there with them with a good couple of results.
Exactly. So I think Sargent has got to be there. 16th, Pierre Gasly. Qualified 15th, made it out of Q2 as well.
Yeah, to make it out of Q2. I mean, that's great for Alpine. So 3 in that regard. 16th. Obviously, I don't think the Alpines had much good race pace, did they? What was Ocon? 14th.
Yeah, Ocon finished. Ocon qualified 12th, finished 14th. Yeah.
Yeah. So he got out qualified by Ocon. Got out raced by Ocon. It's a 2.
It's a 2, yeah. I mean, once again, just like Bottas and Joe, you're kind of. It's hard to rate drivers based on the race in this sort of regard because
they've done nothing wrong. No one did really anything wrong during the race.
No, they just didn't have the pace, and he's been outdone by his teammates. So you have to base him off that, really. So it's a 2 for Pierre Gasly.
These ratings ain't bloody good. We've had 5
No,
drives,
they're not.
none of them at least a 3 yet.
I know, yeah.
Bloody hell.
Zhou Guanyu. That's a 3. It's a 3. We've got a 3 for Zhou Guanyu. No, he's out qualified, but no, he's not out qualified Bottas, but he's out raced Bottas in a race that's very difficult. He's done all right, hasn't he? I think nothing more needs to be said there.
Yeah.
Esteban Ocon, 14th.
It's a 3.
It's a 3. I mean, he's all he's done is outdone Albon.
He's outdone his teammate. That he's where you expect it to be. He's not done anything light enough. He just kept it on the road. Beat his teammate. It's a 3.
Albon, also, we got to remember, Ocon was running close to the points at one point in the race too. So he put himself in the prime position to, if something happened to someone in front, he was there to pick up potential points. So
yeah, he was there.
Yeah. Right. Daniel Ricciardo.
Right. Well, he got into Q3. Beat Perez.
He did.
It's difficult because... Like, if Yuki wasn't where he was, that's definitely a 4 for Ricciardo for qualifying.
It's a very, very, very good qualifying from Daniel.
Do you know what I mean? But Yuki's outdone him.
I'm gonna be really harsh on here, and you know I love Daniel Ricciardo, and I've been lenient with him before. I'm gonna give him a 2, right, for the whole weekend because
for the whole weekend.
Yeah, because qualifying was great, but then again, Yuki showed that the RB had the pace to do that. Like you said. In the race, both RBs had chances to score points. Yuki followed through with that. Ricciardo did not. And he still finished behind both Hasses as well. So that's...
Yeah.
I expect him to finish behind Perez.
Yeah.
Maybe, obviously, Tsunoda, Stroll, if Stroll comes through. He finished behind both Hasses, though, as well.
Yeah.
And he's behind Yuki, and he's not on the pace. He's not on that level. I can't... It's underperforming. It is underperforming for me.
The race was underperforming. The qualifying was performing.
Yeah, but then again, Yuki showed that that's where the car's at.
Yeah. Well,
unless both of them have just done an absolute madness.
Well, I think that is the case. I think the car is at a point where it's one of them should probably scrape through into Q3, not both of them. I think that's the where the car is at. I think they're at a point like if they hook up a lap, they can get Q3, but where the car's at is actually top end of Q2.
So am I being too harsh to Ricciardo?
So
I give him a 3?
I do think both of them pulled out really good laps to get into qualifying. I think Daniel's laps are very underrated because of how good Yuki was. Do you know what I mean? Like
that's fair.
Without Yuki there, we're all saying, "Oh my God, Ricciardo's put that car Q3. It's a phenomenal lap. Great."
Yeah.
But the fact that Yuki's there,
it's
overshadowed Ricciardo's lap a bit.
Yeah.
But the race, no, it was shocking.
Yeah. No, he should have been.
The thing is, the quali was a 4, I'd give. The race was a 2. And the only thing that I'm going to be harsh with as well, same with you, put it as a 2, was all through free practice and Q1 and Q2. He was on the fringe of going out all the time. Yuki had the pace all the way through every session, all the way through practice, all the way through qualifying, all the way through the race.
He needs to be beating Yuki Tsunoda.
He's got to be beaten, if not within a 10th of Yuki.
Yeah.
In every session, he can't be hitting up at the end of Q1 being 15th or something. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And Yuki's up there at the end of Q2 being bloody P2.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, I think you've got to judge him by that as well. Let's move on then to Kevin Magnussen. You know what? For once, actually, it's not.
For once, K-Mag's kept it clean, and it's really pissed me off because of how boring this race was. He can't do anything right, this man.
I know. What's he doing? It's a 1. No, I'm joking. Obviously, it was an absolutely stinker of a qualifying session, right? Considering Hulkenberg's in Q3 and he's in Q1. But his recovery in the race was good. He made it from 18th to 12th.
Yeah.
I think he made the most positions out of anyone in the field in the race.
Well,
on a track that you can't take. So Magnussen kept the pace. He finished behind Hulkenberg in the end. And I think it's a 3. You know, it's a shocking qualifying, but he's brought himself back up.
He's brought him back. I'd give him a 3 as well.
He's done all right, Kevin Magnussen.
He had a good race.
Yeah, he's had a decent race there, and he's, like I've been mentioning about what Ocon should be doing, what Ricciardo should be doing. Magnussen is putting himself in that position, even with Hulkenberg, that if anything happens to top runners, he's there getting points. You know, if 2 people crash, both Haas drivers on 9th and 10th, and that's valuable points. So, yeah, I give him a 3. Nico Hulkenberg. I think Hulkenberg's really unlucky here. Because in the end, Stroll had the pace, Perez had the pace. It was between him and Tsunoda for a point, if nothing happened to anyone else. And he had an amazing qualifying, but unfortunately, he didn't manage to finish in front of Yuki.
No, he did. I mean, you look at it. I mean, he didn't manage to finish in front of Yuki. He outqualified. Yuki outqualified Hulkenberg. Yuki outraced Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, Yuki was just faster over the weekend than Hulkenberg.
Yeah. He's really unlucky to not get a point, but it would be a 4. But the fact that he didn't score points, I've got to give him a 3. But it's a very high 3.
I think it's a 3. I mean, he's just done Haas things. I mean, Q3 again, very good from him. 4.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything wrong in the race. It's a 3 race. It's where you expect him to be. Where the Haas car is, P11, P12, P13, P10 area. That's why so it's a 3. I mean, the only thing that you could say that could give him a 4 is the fact that he did get Q3 quali, whereas his teammate's Q1.
Quite convincingly.
But his teammate went out Q1 because of impeding, didn't he?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he did. Let's move on to Yuki Tsunoda then. Yuki Tsunoda. It's a 5 from me. I'm sorry. It's a 5. You know, in the we've got Formula A and Formula B right now, right? So you've got the Red Bull to Aston Martin is your top 5 cars. Aston Martin on the pace.
Aston Martin in there still.
Yeah, I think Fernando. If Stroll's 9th, I mean, come on, Fernando should be.
Fernando's 19th.
On paper, but when you've got Formula A. When you've got Formula A and Formula B, right, you are restricted to the amount. And we've seen this, right? So compared to last year, the bottom 5 are not getting as many points.
Yeah.
It's not happening. So Tsunoda to consistently be scoring points, and he's done it again. He's got Q3. He's outqualified his teammate. He's outperformed his teammate. He's been ahead in every session, as you mentioned. And to then actually pull through and and Fernando was the only driver to not be off the pace. But guess what? Out of the next 10 drivers on the grid, guess who was the one to pick up the point? It was Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah.
So for that, he gets a 5.
Yeah.
And he's a brilliant weekend from him once again.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. Brilliant.
Brilliant weekend from Yuki Tsunoda.
Good job.
So, Lance Stroll.
I mean, again, you got to look at Lance compared to his teammate. He's outdone his teammate outdone his race, got in the points after a Q2 exit.
Yep. Stroll's had a very, very good weekend.
Good strategy. I think very underrated weekend for Stroll.
I'm going to give Lance Stroll a 4. I think it's very good.
I know. The thing is, are you giving Lance Stroll a 4 because it's Lance Stroll? Do you know what I mean? Like
yes.
If Fernando just did what Lance Stroll did, it's a 3.
Yeah.
But you're giving Lance Stroll a 4 because it's Lance Stroll.
Because the expectation is that he finishes behind Fernando. But the fact that... So, the thing is with Fernando Alonso, obviously he made a mistake and he's been off the pace compared to Stroll for most of the weekend. The thing is, though, we always expect Fernando to beat Stroll. Fernando is kind of the pinnacle of the Aston Martin's pace, usually.
Yeah.
So the fact that Stroll's managed to beat Fernando kind of tells you a lot about how good of a weekend he's had. And the thing is,
how bad of a weekend Alonso's had.
Or how bad of a weekend Aston Martin has had. And the thing is, even when Aston Martin have had a good weekend, when Alonso's been in the top 5, Lance Stroll is finishing outside of the points and getting outraced by Yuki Tsunoda and Hulkenberg. However, when Aston Martin isn't having a good weekend and Alonso's down out of Q1, Stroll's getting a point. Stroll's getting points.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, it's a 4 for Lance Stroll. A very good weekend for Lance Stroll. Like you said, you could argue it's a 3 because is that where he should be?
That's where he should be. That is literally where he should be. And I think we're giving him a 4 because of how bad he is as a driver.
Absolutely, and I'm fully behind that. Lance Stroll's the GOAT now.
Yeah, I'll give him a 4 because it's Lance. But if this is any other driver,
yeah,
it's a mediocre weekend. But because it's Lance and the weekends he's been having, it is a 4.
Yeah, he's been having absolutely stinkers. But yeah, it's a good weekend from Lance Stroll. Let's move on then to someone who definitely didn't have a good weekend. 8th, Sergio Perez, qualified 11th, finished 54 seconds behind his teammate who won the race.
Mate, don't.
And qualified on pole.
And he goes out in Q2 to Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda and Hulkenberg. Honestly, in a car that's won a race, mate, it's a 1.
So let me just play devil's advocate for a second.
Devil's advocate?
Because I do agree, but I just kind of want to ponder this thought. It's kind of the same Stroll situation, right? How much is that Perez being absolutely shit, or is it how much compared to how much is it Max just being absolutely unbelievable?
See, Max winning. Max has had a ridiculously good weekend.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, but that Red Bull's not like miles off the pace like Perez has shown. The Red Bull was thereabouts still in race winning contention. We would have probably have guessed Max may have had a point of finishing 3rd. That's what we were thinking after Friday.
Yeah.
So if Max was finished 3rd, you expect Perez to be at least 5th.
Yeah.
But Max is winning. And that could just be Max being very good. But you can't be qualifying in that Red Bull behind your sister team, both cars. You can't. It's as simple as that. Full stop. You can't. That's an automatic 1. And then to be only 8th, a full pit stop behind the Mercedes, mind you, almost a minute behind your teammate who's winning the race, it's not acceptable.
No, you're right. And I think this is the pinnacle of Perez's problem. When the Red Bull is absolutely dominant, he finishes 2nd or 3rd, no problem. But when the McLaren and the Ferraris are looking to be on pace, if not quicker than the Red Bull, he just absolutely capitulates.
Yep, and it's not good enough.
He needs to be there, because if this carries on, Red Bull genuinely could lose the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, I mean, Ferrari aren't far away.
No, they're not. Ferrari are not far away.
And McLaren are on a charge.
Yeah. They very much are.
If it carries on this way, with the top 5 being both Ferraris, both McLarens, and Max, and Perez down in fucking 8th behind the Mercedes.
Behind the Mercedes. Maybe even Fernando.
Behind Yuki and Fernando.
Yeah.
Honestly, if Perez has that weekend, Fernando's on pace, right?
Yuki's there.
You're seriously looking at Perez not even getting a point on one weekend if he performs like that again.
Yeah, and imagine if it happens around Monaco and Hulkenberg's on his qualifying form. And,
yeah, it's simply not good enough.
No, I agree. It's a 1 from Perez. Yeah, he's had a good start to the season, but I think this race shows his major problems that he has.
You started to see a downfall a little bit in Miami.
Yeah,
you did start to see it.
Yeah,
and then this race has just highlighted the downfall.
Yeah, yep, that's right. Okay, 7th, George Russell out-qualified Lewis Hamilton in 6th, finished the race in 7th and behind Hamilton. For me, this is a 4 for George Russell. And 4. The reason why is because Mercedes didn't need to pit George Russell. But they did because they wanted their fastest lap point. Because George Russell then got fastest lap. So either way, they were getting 6th and 7th, whether it was because Russell, remember, was in front of Hamilton and would have finished in front of Hamilton.
Yeah.
But they got
but that's the thing I'm coming back to now.
What?
Would he?
Yes.
But no, because I've had a look at the pace, right? And the rate that Hamilton was catching with the laps that was remaining, Hamilton would have had 6 laps in DRS zone of George. The rate that he was catching George at the rate that he was, because you got to remember, he was 10 seconds behind George. When George came in the pits, he got it down to 3.
All right.
So
okay.
if you look at the pace difference, Hamilton was catching George. Now, that's not to say Hamilton was going to overtake George. I don't know, because obviously Imola is ridiculously hard to overtake. But Hamilton was faster than George at that point.
That's fair enough. I just think
it's
Mercedes...
Mercedes
didn't need
pulled
to.
him into the pits, but I think that they could see these two are going to be battling.
It was the right choice in the end because they managed to maximize their points.
Yeah,
Mercedes
they did manage to maximize the points because they sat in the position, and
Yeah.
I think if Perez hadn't have just pitted and was within Hamilton's pit window, they would have stopped Hamilton and not George.
Mm.
But I think Perez was in Hamilton's pit window. They didn't want to have to go through Hamilton overtaking Perez and put that at risk.
They didn't want to risk that, no.
George seemed like the easier option to maximise the points.
And
That's what Mercedes were thinking.
They played it, and they played it well. They played it very well. And but yeah, no. The thing is, we never know, right? Because overtaking around here is hard. But
yeah, well, we're never gonna know.
He was in position. He was racing ahead of Hamilton. He qualified in front of Hamilton. And he got the fastest lap point. I think it's a 4. It's a very good weekend from George Russell. It's not obviously a 5. You can't do that. But I think it's a 4 from George.
I don't think it's a 4. I think but I think both Mercedes are 3s.
Hamilton's a 3. George is a 4 for me because George outqualified Hamilton. Hamilton got outqualified by Yuki. That's my assessment of the situation. And George managed to secure the extra point for Mercedes. So I think in that regard.
Yeah. He's going to secure the extra bloody point when he's on fucking 30 lap fresher tyres and everybody else.
It's a challenging circuit, man. Leave him alone.
Yeah, but but you know the degradation levels around Imola. When you're on fresh tyres, as we've seen with the overtaking of everyone, when you're on fresh tyres, you're about 2 seconds a lap quicker.
Yeah, I'm giving George a 4 because George has had a very, very good weekend. He's had a good race.
I'm just going to give him a 3, and I'm giving Hamilton a 3. I just think it's the expectation of Mercedes. That's it. That's all they've done.
And don't get me wrong, Hamilton's had a very good weekend as well. They've
just had line of stern all weekend. They're both following each other. Other than the Hamilton mistake, it would have just been Mercedes following each other within 2-3 seconds for the whole race.
Yeah, and they're consistent.
Yeah, it was literally just that, and I think it was just a bog standard, clean weekend from Mercedes, maximising the potential points. That was it. They couldn't go further. They couldn't go back.
I think personally as well, Mercedes were the team out of everyone to maximise fully. So,
yeah.
I think they were personally. Okay, moving on then. So we'll go to 5th then. Carlos Sainz. I mean, he hasn't done anything wrong. He's just finished behind a McLaren and his teammate. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're going off what we expect from Sainz at the beginning of the season, he needs to do better. But at the same time, when Charles was behind Carlos, we did say, hold on a minute, like he still had good races. Like we can't dispute that. I think Sainz is doing everything he needs to. He's within touching distance. He's not taking anyone out. He's not made mistakes. He's consistent. He's just been off the pace compared to Leclerc.
The thing is with Carlos, yeah, exactly. He's been off the pace in quali. He got outdone by Oscar. I mean, the thing is, we can't, like, what are you giving Charles? That's the question.
I know what I'm giving Charles.
Like, it depends what you're giving Charles to what you can give Carlos. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, how far behind was Carlos to Charles?
I think it was like 10, 15 seconds, wasn't it? Something like that.
It's a pretty large gap.
It is. I'm gonna give Carlos a 3. I think he's had
Yeah.
he's not
Yeah.
maximized like Charles, but he's been close enough. I mean, he was in the position. Obviously, I think the McLarens overall were quicker than the Ferraris in the end.
Yeah.
So I think he can be excused slightly from being outdone by Piastri.
I'm not being hard. It's a 3 from me as well. I was just it just highlights the fact that he hasn't been amazing this weekend, and there's a potential if he carries on like this, it could go to a 2. That sort of gap with how close the McLarens and the Ferraris are, you have to be beating an Oscar.
I think personally, the 2s come in for Sainz if Mercedes get it right and they get closer. If Mercedes end up beating, if it's consistently weekend out, Mercedes are beating Sainz, but Piastri, Charles, and Norris are still ahead, then I think that's when you start thinking about, like, if that time difference is then putting the Mercedes in play, then I think that's when we have that conversation.
Yeah. He's running a tightrope where he can't drop back any further.
No, he can't. Oscar Piastri. It's a difficult one for Oscar because he's had a very, very, very good weekend. Even out-qualified Lando.
He did, but he dropped 3 places.
So it's severely affected his race.
He looked so he's the only one, I would say, that looked racy this weekend.
And then again, I think this also plays into Oscar's downfall. He looked racy, but like once again,
he overcooked it.
And I think if he didn't overcook it, he could have potentially been closer to Leclerc in the end.
If he bided his time.
And didn't try to rush past Sainz.
Experience, though.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. And for that, I'm giving him a 3. It's a good weekend from Oscar. A very good weekend from Oscar. I'm more impressed by Oscar the more I watch him because he's not on Lando's level, but he's where McLaren need him to be.
Well, he's started to get more like after these are 2 good races. He's just had Miami and Imola. He's turned it around. I think China and Japan were huge problems, and I'm not backing down. Like if people think I'm being harsh on Oscar, I'm not backing down because they were awful from him.
He was too far behind.
He was too far behind. He was nowhere near the front runners.
He was racing the Mercedes.
He was behind the Mercedes. That's not good enough.
No.
But he's turned it around Miami and Imola. He's back where he needs to be. He is still behind Lando, but we expect that. But he's in the sharp end.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc. I think a very good weekend from Charles. In the end,
the promise that we had and what we got.
Yeah,
that's my problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a Charles thing, though. The same way it's not a Carlos thing. Like, I think we were expecting Ferrari to win this race. And the fact that they didn't puts a damper on it. But, like, at the end of the day, their pace clearly wasn't 3 or 4 tenths. Like,
well, clearly not. No.
So, for me, it's a 4 for Charles. He's outdone his teammate. He's finished on the podium again. And he's had a very good qualifying. He's done everything he can. And it's a 4. The only reason it's not a 5 is because he's not completely shattered my expectations.
It's not a 5.
He's not shattered my expectations, but he's had a very, very good weekend against Charles with the consistency at the moment.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'll give him a 4.
Lando Norris.
4.
This man's very close to a 5 for me, but I'm giving a 4 because he hasn't won the race.
It's a 4. Piastri out-qualified him.
Yeah, Piastri did out-qualify. If Lando Norris had won this race, overtaking Max Verstappen, it's a 5. But he didn't, so...
Yeah.
But he didn't. So it's a 4 for Norris. Very good. Once again, Lando Norris, right? If this McLaren and this Red Bull come any closer, right? It's a Lando Norris and Max Verstappen championship fight.
It could. I'm just hoping that the Ferraris get there and we can see Charles getting in the mix as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see this. And let's move on to Max Verstappen.
It's a 5. It's a 5.
It's his best week.
It's the best weekend that he's had this year.
It's the best weekend I'd argue he's had since
Miami.
He's
had for a long time.
Since Miami last year.
It's the best one he's had for a long time.
He's just he has shown this weekend why he is the best driver on the grid.
Even I'll admit he's had a smashing weekend.
like when Red Bull going into the weekend were on the back foot, like even in practice, they genuinely were
on
nowhere.
the back foot. They were on the back foot in practice.
They were behind Ferrari and McLaren. They
got
were not.
They eventually got the setup right just in time for quali. I mean, you expect it to always be. There has been a little bit of practice sessions, like practice one a couple of times this year, that's seen Max down in fifth, and you're like, oh, maybe. But then they do always turn it round.
But this time it wasn't like the sandbags were lifted.
No, this time
it was close.
Genuinely, he had to rinse the car to win the race.
He had to drag that car up.
Yeah, he had to rinse it. Yeah. He had to use everything. And that was good to see.
Yeah, very good to see.
So, yeah, it's a 5.
More of them, please. If Max wins like this every weekend, but he does it like that, I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, because at least then he's being put under pressure.
Yeah, and if we get to see some battling, but he comes out on top, fair enough, we're seeing good racing.
Yeah, and I do think if you put Max under pressure, he is quite still hot under the collar. If you put him under severe pressure, you could then start to see maybe a couple of mistakes. Because at the end of the day, he's not human. Mistakes will happen at some point.
And there's one thing that... No,
yeah,
go on.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say that there's one thing with Max as well. Like, I imagine if there was an extra lap or two and Lando could, try and overtake, Max would have got the elbows out. And
Max would have been... it would have been elbows out like we would have had 2021 Hamilton Max in turn 1.
You know Lando's going over the curb in turn 2. Like you just know it would have happened.
You knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would have tainted that weekend. If that had come about, that would have tainted the weekend for Max, because I don't like to see that.
No, he shouldn't. The thing is, he would have done it as well.
I know he would have done it because that's the way that he is, but I don't like to see that sort of stuff.
No, and the thing is, he knows he's going to win the championship. He doesn't need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a bit silly.
It would have been, but either way, it's 5 from Max. Let's move on to our our flop of the weekend and our the greatest team / driver of the weekend. Then, shall we? So, what is your flop of the weekend?
Fernando.
I agree. Fernando Alonso is my flop of the weekend. Do we need to explain why?
Probably no, it's evidently.
Yeah. Who is your biggest good surprise of the weekend then?
Surprise?
Well, I mean best performing driver / team of the weekend. Who stood up to you as the team that was able, or driver that able to just, impressed you?
Yuki.
You're gonna go with Yuki? We've given a few to Yuki, haven't we?
I'm going to have to go with Yuki. I mean, Max is in contention for it. Don't get me wrong, Max is in contention, but Max has the expectation to still win. Yuki over the whole weekend. I think the Q2 lap's still ingrained in my mind.
Yeah, it was a good Q2 lap. Very good.
I think I've just got to give it to Yuki.
Yeah.
Out of everyone at the moment. I mean, as a team, Haas are still there with their 11th and 12th finish.
Yep.
But no, I'm going to give it Yuki.
I have 2. I can't decide between both, so I'm going to say both.
Go
on. I was first thinking Max Verstappen because
Max came across my mind.
I mean, I never usually give it to Max if he wins because it's just what he does. But this weekend, as we mentioned, he was pushed to the absolute limit.
It was hard for him eventually.
Yeah, and he's still come out on top, which proves his worth. But then again, Max is always a boring answer for that question, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give it to Mercedes, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I can see that because they just maximised it all.
You know what? No, because Mercedes, I expect from Mercedes this season, I expect them to really disappoint me. Right? But, to be fair, they couldn't have... There's no way they were touching Max and the McLarens and Ferraris.
No.
They finished in front of everyone else quite comfortably, and they got the fastest lap. They played the cards right, got the strategy right, got the fastest lap. Both cars were on pace. Hamilton made a mistake, but it wasn't too major. And at the end of the day, they've scored maximum points for where the pace is at. I think they've brought everything. Like, you could argue...
Well, they didn't do much thinking to do, did they?
No, they didn't. But you could argue with Ferrari's case, Carlos could have finished in front of Piastri. You could argue for McLaren's pace, Oscar got a penalty, so that affected the race for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, Red Bull, Perez is down. But Mercedes, both where they absolutely could be. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd give it to Mercedes or Max. But either way, that's been pretty much it for the post-race pod. Any final thoughts?
No, just Imola needs improvement for next year.
It does, yeah. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.